All right. Hello and welcome everyone to Soulframe Scholar. I am Brozime. Many of you will know me as I've covered DE's other game Warframe very extensively in the past, but today we're here to talk about Soulframe and the first question that many of you will have, which is probably going to be, which one of these starters should I choose? We're going to be talking about everything that has to do with each of them and help you make an informed choice before you get stuck with one you don't like. For that, we should probably talk about the elephant in the room, which is why you should bother listening to me at all about any of this stuff. What could I possibly know? Well, thankfully, I have done everything in Soulframe. As you can see in the top left, am account level 14 as of the recording of this video. We're working on getting to 15 as new items release. And I have every single pact in the game, every single weapon in the game, every single piece of armor in the game, with the exception of the Halloween exclusive mask. Missed that one, but we'll get that this year. So I've done functionally everything. I know how to farm all of the stuff in the game. I know what farms are going to be relevant and like what things need to be done quickly or what things you're going to run into in terms of problems. And I don't know if I can give you more credential than that. Hopefully that is plenty, and we can get started talking about these starters. Now, the order that I'm going to be going in is I'm going to be talking about Spirit, and then Courage, and then Grace in terms of the starters. And you can follow along on the timeline if you want to see a specific one and what it has to offer. So, starting with Spirit, each of these is going to give you both a pact, which is a class, and a weapon, which is pretty self-explanatory. In addition to that, it's worth noting before we get into these that they all will start you with an individual faction start. Spirit starts you with Alka's Children, Courage starts you with the Kith of Kings, and Grace gives you the Silent Rose as your different starter factions. None of these lock you in permanently anymore, so you can freely switch between them, though it is worth noting that it's going to be a little bit of a grind through the faction you start with before you can get access to the others. So you will be kind of locked in a little bit before you've done some farming. So with that, we don't need to talk about the factions too much as they're freely swappable. With this, though, let's talk about what we are going to have at the beginning. So Oselda is our Spirit starter, and Oselda is very, very powerful. I'm going to swap to just some gameplay footage and talk about these abilities while you are seeing how they work. So first and foremost, the first ability on Oselda is Bestone. This turns enemies to stone. It's extremely powerful. It has a very large AoE, and in addition to freezing them solid, you also get a significant damage multiplier on your hits that are going to be breaking them out of the stone if they don't just outright kill them. This ability has a pretty low cooldown and is just generally very powerful and works on the vast majority of enemies, and even enemies that it doesn't stop, it's going to at least do a little bit of damage to. With that, it's insanely powerful with pretty much every weapon in the game. Hilariously, the weapon that you start with here, Odiak, is probably the worst weapon to use with this ability, as it really only functions greatly whenever using the alt fire of the Odiak, which is the big orb you're going to see me using. That is kind of funny because Odiak is a really, really strong weapon that is actually quite powerful and one of the best weapons in the game. It just doesn't have a huge amount of synergy specifically with Oselda's first ability or really any of Oselda's abilities, but it will serve you very well whenever you get other hacks to go with it. The second ability of Oselda is Elder Bloom. Elder Bloom is basically a bloom, a big flower that you put down, and this gives you rapid and huge amounts of healing for yourself and anyone that you happen to be playing with if you are playing in a party. This healing is so much that even whenever you're fighting larger enemies like Myselcams, which are big mortar type enemies, they really can't kill you through this amount of healing. So as long as the flower exists, unless you're going to get one shot, you can pretty much rest assured that you're going to live through anything that is happening to you, which is very, very strong. The third ability for Oselda is Phantom Flock, where this is basically like a skill shot where you shoot it out, it hits an enemy, and then it just pelts them with birds for a very good duration. This can notably, if it kills its target, spread a little bit and kind of keep attacking new enemies, though it can be a bit finicky in that. But this ability is great because it does a ton of stagger damage and will break the block of enemies. This is really, really powerful on larger targets like bannerets and big enemies that you're going to be fighting very commonly, as it really just locks them down completely and just doesn't let them do what they want to do. Overall, Oselda is just a very, very strong class. I would put it like It's probably top 3, top 4 in the game currently, and it works very, very well with a bunch of different weapons. The thing that I will note about Oselda is that you probably will want to get a bow pretty much as soon as possible, as bows I think have the most synergy with what Oselda wants to do. That being that you can be-stone an enemy, they are frozen completely solid and vulnerable, and then hitting them with a charged headshot from a bow will kill most of the enemies you're going to run into in this game post-haste. Otherwise, Oselda doesn't really have any negative synergy with much, as there's not a whole lot of weapons that are, incapable of heavy attacking. But the weapons that are like slower, big hits, like polearms and such, do tend to be a bit better, specifically with that bestone synergy. So yeah, that's like what's going on with Oselda. It's the starter that I started with, and I do like it a whole lot. Now, with Oselda talked about, we can talk about the Courage starter, which is Tethrin. Tethrin is very, very powerful. I would say this is top 2, if not the best, of the packs in the game for playing by yourself. It is incredibly powerful and offers a whole lot. This is the just like tank, get in their face and kill them packed. It is extremely powerful. You have Fellust, which is a red buff that affects your weapon. This is a buff that affects you for a number of hits, and the bigger the hit you're outputting, the better for this in general. Though it is worth noting it does work very well on bows as well, even on their large AoE, though the damage is spread across all of the arrows. So Fellust, very strong, and really low cooldown. Easy buff to just apply and just chunk in damage on enemies. And similarly, its second ability, Call of the Ancients, is a big swirling aggro call that is not only going to give you aggro from most, if not all, of the enemies in your vicinity, it is also going to give you both a damage and defense bonus, which is just more damage to stack on top of what you're getting out of its first ability, and the increased defenses are very welcome, of course, as everyone is on your ass now. Third, we have Clash with great synergy, once again, with Call of the Ancients. Call of the Ancients lets everyone look at you and come towards you. Clash, you clang your weapons together and do a huge amount of stagger damage to all enemies in your vicinity. This will commonly either open enemies up for finishers while they're standing, or just straight knock them down. So you can get huge like ground finishers and standing front finishers for a very large amount of damage. In addition to that, Clash also gives you a buff that makes you very hard to stagger, meaning that you're going to just be able to attack with impunity. You're going to be able to just, have large defenses from your 2, not be able to be interrupted with your 3, big damage from your 1, and you're just going to be cutting through any group of enemies that you come across. It's worth noting, and I haven't mentioned this yet, there are skill trees for each of these. As you level them, you will get points, and you can put points into that. Generally speaking, across all of these, they'll have 2 unique things that is like unique to the class. For Oselda, they're not particularly important, but for Tethrin, it's very important to talk about Conqueror. This is whenever you kill an enemy, you heal. That is crucially important because it means that you really don't need to worry about how many health potions you have left, as opposed to worrying about how you're going to kill the next guy. And that really puts you on like a rolling boulder type tilt, where just rolling through groups of enemies is going to leave you with full health, meaning you're ready to go for the next group right away. So Tethrin, very powerful. Conqueror is a very important one that I would suggest putting at least 2 points into. So I assume later, whenever we get even more points to fill out this tree, Conqueror will be something that you'd want to max out. Also, this is just kind of how the trees tend to look. If anyone is curious about kind of what your investment should look like, these up here are all statistical increases, which are generally considered better right now. Moving on, though, we need to talk about the weapon for Tethrin. The weapon for Tethrin is the Solos 1. Now, this is the downside to starting with this class. The Solos 1 is not only the single most common weapon in the entire game, it also is probably overall the worst one. Not because it's a longsword, as longswords are very solid and have actually a very powerful skill tree that you can level up a few things into that are unique versus other weapons, but because Solos just really doesn't do very much damage. It is a fine weapon, and because Tethrin is going to be supporting it, you're really not going to have any issue, even if enemy levels get up to like 20 plus, but Tethrin is going to be doing the heavy lifting there. I will say, for Tethrin specifically, if you swap it up to a much better weapon like Orin and Umber, which is a sword and shield that's pretty easily acquirable, you will just blow through enemies like they don't even exist in pretty much any level that can currently spawn in the game. It is incredibly powerful, the Sword and Shield, and what I would definitely suggest. Though something like a Polearm is still definitely very worthwhile, as that synergizes once again with Fellust quite well. So yeah, lots of very good things to be putting on here. Again, with bows, this also works very well. Tetherin just kind of works with everything. Like anything that you're doing with like this significant buff up to your damage and healing on every kill, it's just gonna kind of work out for you no matter what you decide to do. Now, finally, we have our Grace starter to talk about, and that is Sirin. So, as you probably have guessed, Sirin is the weaker of the three. That being said, there is definitely like a gameplay loop that Sirin can offer, and that is that Sirin very much wants to do finishers. It's also worth noting that I do think that of the three starters, Sirin is probably currently the most buggy, as some of the abilities don't work quite right in a lot of situations, and that might be contributing to why it is a little bit worse off right now. So, its first ability is Pictrix Powder, which is basically you shoot like this red dart that explodes and stuns all of the enemies. This, per its description in-game, is supposed to let you sneak attack and do finishers on enemies, but currently it does not allow for that whenever you use it. It is a very solid stun as it stands currently, and it has a very, very low cooldown that's refreshed very easily by killing enemies, but it does not do what it says currently, so I just want to take that with what it is. If it did allow you to get finishers out of it, it would be considerably better. Speaking of getting finishers out of it, that's kind of what we're going to be doing on all of Sirin's abilities. Its second ability, Trick of the Light, is a decoy that you can put out that draws enemies to it, and whenever enemies look at it, you can do back finishers to them as they're looking away from you, which is going to give you finishers, and that's going to refresh your cooldowns and such like that. And in addition, whenever the decoy is destroyed, it will explode and do some damage. The damage is better than you might expect and will actually clear some groups of enemies in some cases. But this ability I've actually found to be most useful when used alongside a bow, as you can set down the AoE of the bow of the rain of arrows with the decoy in the middle, and enemies will just hang out in that. They'll get the decoy blown up on them and just be pelted with arrows constantly, which is actually a pretty good way to use this. And it's a good thing that this actually does start with a bow, but we're going to get to that in a moment. The third ability of Sirin is Glamour, where functionally you turn into a butterfly. It's kind of akin to an invisibility. You cannot sprint while you are in butterfly form, which is a thing that I kind of really don't like about it. I don't really think there's much reason you shouldn't be able to sprint during it, but you can dodge around and use those keys to move a bit faster in it. This is going to let you just back finisher any enemy that you do get behind, which is all fine and good. The main use of Glamour, I will say, that I found is that you can actually yoink some objectives even off the backs of enemies. If you do need to like collect plans for an enemy or any of those types of objectives, you can go in with Glamour, just pick up the objective and just leave without even having to fight the enemies there. And that could be like a reasonable upside to this to speed you through some of the objectives in the game. But overall, Glamour, I think, is a bit on the weak side currently. Now, the weapon that you start with is Thistle. Thistle, the bow, is very, very strong. Bows in general just got completely reworked. And they're great. I would say they are not only the most fun, but probably also the best weapons in the game currently. Extremely, extremely strong. The Rain of Arrows, great AoE to just have, and also the single shots can headshot. The charge up does significant damage. Just good all the way around. They have solid scaling. They're just really, really good right now, and they work well with all of the starter classes. That being said, Thistle and Juniper, the two bows, are really not particularly difficult to get no matter what starter you start with, so unless you're hard set on only ever using a bow, I don't think that's a really considerable reason to specifically pick Sirin. But if you want to be sneaky and do some finishers and stuff, I think this is a reasonable class to start with. There is one thing that I do want to talk about in this video because I think it's important to note, because it's kind of just a piece of feedback I have about the class. In terms of Sirin's passives, it has Shrouded, which lets you see enemies in the dark, which I don't think is particularly useful, as there really aren't levels dark enough where this would ever be of benefit. So this is kind of a bit of a wasted passive, which I think is a real shame. And also Pickpocket, which is while you are in Glamour, if you sneak up on enemies, they will give you like an extra little bag of loot. Now, I don't like this for two different reasons. One, because it's not really like affecting the gameplay too much. And two, because I really don't think there should be looting abilities in this game. Incentivizing like, building Sirin just specifically and only to get loot is a thing that we kind of have in Warframe, where the main purpose of some frames is to just get you more loot, and I think that's a pretty unhealthy reason for their play. But I would really like to see these two passives be changed to a thing that I think Sirin could really use and would make it stand out a lot more. That being on one of these, it doesn't really matter to me which one, a movement speed bonus to make it like a fast, more roguey class, maybe like, I don't know, like a 20% movement speed or maybe 15 on each level because they're usually staged in 4s. And then additionally, a damage bonus or some kind of other bonus that you're going to get when you do a finisher to enemies, so that whenever you're fighting enemies that can't be finishered, which is one of the primary problems with this class, you can fall back on finishering like one of the additional enemies in the arena, and then using that damage bonus to deal damage to, say, like the Cam, the big mortar emplacements, or some other type of enemy, as that can be a big downside whenever this weapon, or whenever this class doesn't have access to finishing an enemy. But yeah, there's kind of like some thoughts on Sirin. I think that like that change would really shift things a bit and probably equalize Sirin with the other starters at current. And that's what's going on with all of the starters. Overall, I think all three of the starters are very reasonable. They're not like huge downsides or anything like that. And pretty reasonable to start with any and all of them. I will say, faction-wise, as a small consideration, right now, Alka's Children and the Silent Rose both have Ode Tempest in them as rewards. So if you are starting as either Oselda or Sirin, working up to Ode Tempest is the pact that I think is the single best pact in the game right now. So that is a small consideration for picking one of those two as well. But yeah, hopefully this video has been helpful to you and you learned some stuff here. I'm going to have some other videos that are going to be coming out that are going to be talking about, like, what do these stats do? How do I even get any of these things? What farm? What's a combat art? And all of that good business. So I hope you look forward to it, and I will see you there.